What started as an ordinary regular season WNBA game quickly turned into one of the league's biggest controversies of the year. A single moment on the court has sparked non-stop debate about officiating, player safety, and whether the WNBA is doing enough to protect its biggest stars. The conversation wasn't just about one missed whistle. It became a much larger discussion about consistency, accountability, and the way Caitlin Clark has been officiated throughout her young professional career. And by the time everything settled, coaches, players, analysts, and fans were all asking the same question: how did something this serious happen without anyone stopping the game? Let's break down exactly what happened. The play itself lasted only a second. Midway through the second quarter, both teams were scrambling for a loose ball after it bounced free near the paint. Several players dove toward the floor, each trying to gain possession before the other. As bodies piled together, Caitlin Clark ended up underneath the scrum. During the scramble, Phoenix Mercury veteran Alyssa Thomas made contact with Clark's throat while attempting to fight for the basketball. The action happened incredibly fast, making it difficult to recognize in real time. Play never stopped. No whistle was blown. No foul was called. Officials allowed the game to continue as though nothing unusual had happened. At first, very few people realized the significance of what had occurred. Even players standing nearby appeared focused on the loose ball rather than the contact itself. It wasn't until television replays slowed the sequence down that viewers began noticing exactly where the contact occurred. Suddenly, what looked like just another physical basketball play became the center of a growing controversy. The timing only made matters worse. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. Just 2 days earlier, Indiana and Phoenix had already played another emotional matchup filled with physical play, technical fouls, and visible frustration from both benches. Tempers had already been rising. Many believed those tensions carried directly into this game, creating an atmosphere where every hard foul and every officiating decision would receive even greater attention. Then came another controversial moment. Earlier in the same game, Clark had already received a technical foul after reacting toward the officials following a call. The explanation left many confused. Some believed her actions deserved a warning at most, while others questioned why such a minor reaction resulted in a technical foul. Regardless of where people stood, it added another layer of frustration to an already emotional contest. Not long afterward, Clark attempted a three-pointer and landed awkwardly after coming down on a defender's foot. Officials reviewed the play to determine whether additional penalties were necessary. After looking at the replay, they decided not to upgrade the call to BY itself. That decision probably wouldn't have generated much attention. But combined with everything else happening during the game, many fans began feeling that Clark simply wasn't receiving the same protection as other star players. Then came the loose ball play everyone would soon be talking about. As replay angles spread across social media, viewers began examining the contact frame by frame. The debate exploded almost immediately. Some argued Alyssa Thomas was simply battling for position during a chaotic scramble where players often lose awareness of exactly where their arms and hands are moving. Others believed the contact clearly crossed the line and should have resulted in an immediate flagrant foul. What almost everyone agreed on, however, was one thing. The officials completely missed it. That realization quickly shifted the discussion away from Alyssa Thomas herself and toward the league's officiating. People weren't simply asking whether the contact deserved punishment. They were asking why it wasn't recognized in the first place. As the game continued, Clark appeared uncomfortable following the sequence. She eventually left the contest, with Indiana later announcing she was dealing with a back issue that had also been bothering her earlier. Phoenix escaped with a narrow victory. Normally, that would have been the headline. Instead, almost nobody was talking about the final score. The conversation centered almost entirely around the missed call. Within hours, clips of the play had spread across every major sports platform. Former players offered opinions. National media discussed it. Basketball analysts slowed the video down repeatedly. Fans debated whether the league had once again failed to protect one of its biggest stars. The discussion also revived something that had been building for months. Since entering the WNBA, Caitlin Clark has consistently been involved in some of the league's most physical moments. She's absorbed numerous hard fouls, several flagrant fouls, and plenty of contact that has generated heated debate online. Supporters argue that Clark receives a level of physical defense unmatched by almost anyone else in the league. Critics counter that physical basketball is simply part of professional sports and that every star learns to deal with aggressive defenders. But regardless of which side fans supported, this latest incident added even more fuel to an already ongoing conversation. Because it wasn't just another hard foul. It was a play that officials never called at all. And that distinction changed everything. Instead of debating whether the punishment fit the play, everyone was now debating why there had been no punishment in the moment. That question would soon lead directly to one of the strongest public responses from a WNBA coach all season. If the missed call had been the end of the story, the controversy probably would have faded within a few days. Instead, it was what happened after the game that pushed the situation into an entirely different category. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White walked into the post-game press conference with a message that left little room for interpretation. Rather than offering the usual comments about execution, missed opportunities, or adjustments for the next game, she focused almost entirely on the officiating. And she didn't hide her frustration. White described the missed contact involving Caitlin Clark as completely unacceptable. She argued that the play wasn't just another judgment call. It was a serious player safety issue that officials simply failed to recognize. According to White, her coaching staff had already raised concerns with the referees during halftime after reviewing what had happened. Despite those conversations, she believed the second half showed no improvement. She pointed to the free throw numbers, the foul disparity, and what she viewed as inconsistent officiating throughout the night. For a coach who is usually calm and measured during media appearances, the emotional tone immediately stood out. It was obvious this wasn't simply frustration over losing a basketball game. She believed something much bigger was happening. Professional coaches generally understand the risks of criticizing officials publicly. Leagues rarely appreciate coaches questioning referees after games, and those comments can often result in fines or disciplinary action. That's why most coaches choose their words carefully. They'll mention missed calls without directly accusing officials of failing their players. Stephanie White took a different approach. She openly questioned whether the league was doing enough to protect its athletes. Her concern wasn't limited to one possession. Instead, she suggested the issue reflected a larger pattern she had noticed over time. That distinction mattered. Rather than framing the incident as an isolated mistake, she argued that inconsistent officiating had become an ongoing concern. And when the player involved happened to be one of the league's biggest stars, the discussion naturally became even louder. White also emphasized something else. She reminded reporters that Caitlin Clark isn't just another rookie adjusting to professional basketball. She's one of the league's most recognizable faces. A player who has helped bring record television ratings, increased attendance, and enormous national attention to the WNBA. Her point wasn't that Clark deserved special treatment. It was that every player, especially one absorbing repeated physical contact, deserved consistent protection under the rules. That message quickly resonated with fans. Many agreed the conversation wasn't about giving Clark favorable calls. It was about applying the rulebook the same way for everyone. Consistency. That became the word repeated over and over across television shows, podcasts, and social media discussions. As White continued speaking, another important detail emerged. She revealed that concerns about officiating hadn't started that night. According to her, Indiana had already discussed similar issues with league officials long before this game. Those conversations had reportedly taken place privately throughout the season. From White's perspective, those earlier discussions hadn't produced meaningful change. That's why this press conference felt different. Instead of keeping those frustrations behind closed doors, she chose to express them publicly. In doing so, she shifted the conversation from one controversial play to questions about how the league handles officiating overall. Suddenly, the focus wasn't only on the referees working that particular game. People began asking whether the system itself needed improvement. Within hours, White's comments spread far beyond basketball circles. Sports talk shows replayed clips from her press conference. Former players weighed in. Journalists debated whether coaches should speak this openly about officiating. Some applauded White for standing up for her players. Others argued that basketball is an emotional, physical game where officials inevitably miss calls. Still, one fact remained impossible to ignore. The video replay existed, and millions of people had now watched it. That growing attention placed additional pressure on the WNBA to respond. As public debate intensified, league officials reviewed the play themselves. After examining multiple replay angles, they reached a very different conclusion than the one made during the game. The WNBA determined that the contact met the standard for a flagrant foul too. Because the play had not been penalized in real time, the league announced disciplinary action after the fact. Alyssa Thomas received a one-game suspension along with a financial fine. The decision immediately became another major headline. For some fans, it confirmed exactly what they had been saying all along. If the league believed the contact deserved a suspension, then many argued it should have been recognized immediately during the game. Others viewed the announcement differently. They believed the review process demonstrated that the league was willing to correct mistakes when necessary, even if those corrections came later. But even after the suspension was announced, the debate refused to disappear. Instead, a new question emerged. If officials ultimately agreed the contact was serious enough to suspend a player, why wasn't it called when it actually happened? That question became the center of nearly every discussion surrounding the incident. Because disciplinary action after the game couldn't change what had already occurred on the court. The game had already been played. The missed call had already influenced the moment. And the controversy had already spread across the sports world. For many observers, the suspension addressed the individual play. It did not address the larger concerns about consistency that Stephanie White had raised just one day earlier. And before the league could move past the situation, more voices began entering the conversation, taking the story in an even more unexpected direction. Many people expected the story to fade once the WNBA announced Alyssa Thomas's suspension. Instead, the conversation only grew larger. Now, it wasn't just coaches and fans weighing in. Players, medical professionals, and basketball analysts all began adding their perspectives, turning one controversial play into one of the league's biggest talking points of the season. One of the strongest reactions came from inside Indiana's own locker room. Fever guard Sophie Cunningham addressed the incident during an episode of her podcast, and she didn't hold back. According to Cunningham, the physical treatment Caitlin Clark has received throughout the season isn't simply random. She suggested there's a pattern developing, saying Clark often absorbs hard contact while officials fail to intervene quickly enough. Her comments immediately drew attention because they echoed many of the same concerns Stephanie White had expressed after the game. This was no longer just a frustrated coach speaking. Now a teammate was publicly raising similar questions. Cunningham also admitted something that surprised many fans. She explained that during the actual game, most of Indiana's players didn't even realize the contact to Clark's throat had occurred. Everything happened so quickly that teammates focused on the loose ball rather than the collision itself. Only after watching the replay did many of them fully understand what had happened. That detail highlighted just how fast the sequence unfolded. It also reinforced why so many people were debating whether officials should have recognized the contact in real time. Even players standing only a few feet away hadn't immediately seen it. Still, many argued that reviewing video afterward shouldn't become the only way dangerous plays are identified. As Cunningham's comments spread online, the discussion moved beyond basketball strategy and officiating. Medical experts also began analyzing the play. Among them was orthopedic specialist Dr. Nicholas Dubois, who spoke publicly about injuries involving the throat and neck. He explained that the area is far more vulnerable than many people realize. According to him, it doesn't require tremendous force for contact to become dangerous. His point wasn't that Clark had suffered a catastrophic injury. Instead, he emphasized that impacts to the throat deserve careful attention because of the sensitive structures located there. The comments immediately added another dimension to the story. The debate was no longer limited to whether the officials missed a foul. Now people were discussing player safety from a medical perspective. That naturally raised another question. Should the league be taking additional steps to prevent similar situations in the future? Despite those concerns, Dr. Dubois was also careful to avoid assigning intent. He made it clear that he wasn't accusing Alyssa Thomas of deliberately trying to injure anyone. Basketball is a fast, physical sport. Players fight for loose balls. Bodies collide. Accidental contact happens. His larger point focused on prevention rather than blame. If repeated dangerous contact keeps occurring, the league should examine whether officiating standards and player protection policies need improvement. That balanced perspective resonated with many observers. It shifted attention away from individual motives and back toward the system itself. Then the controversy took another unexpected turn. After the suspension was announced, Alyssa Thomas revealed that she and members of her family had received abusive messages and online threats. The reaction quickly became serious enough that the WNBA issued a public statement condemning harassment directed toward Thomas. The league emphasized that disagreements over basketball should never lead to threats against players or their families. Shortly afterward, Stephanie White also addressed the online behavior. Although she had strongly criticized the officiating, she made it clear that harassment, hate speech, racism, and personal attacks had absolutely no place in sports. Her message drew an important distinction. Demanding accountability from officials is one thing. Targeting individual players with abuse is something entirely different. That shift complicated the public conversation. Until then, most discussions centered on officiating and player safety. Now another issue had entered the picture: how quickly online outrage can spiral beyond legitimate criticism. Many fans agreed the missed call deserved scrutiny, but they also agreed that threats and personal attacks crossed a line. The focus was supposed to remain on basketball. Instead, attention increasingly shifted towards social media behavior and the darker side of sports fandom. Ironically, this created another challenge for the league. Officials now found themselves responding not only to questions about missed calls but also to concerns about protecting players from online harassment. The original controversy had evolved into something much larger than anyone expected. Meanwhile, analysts continued examining the broader pattern surrounding Caitlin Clark's first WNBA season. Supporters pointed to the number of hard fouls, physical collisions, and flagrant incidents involving Clark since entering the league. Critics argued that physical defense has always been part of professional basketball and that star players often receive extra attention from opponents. Regardless of which side people supported, one thing became increasingly clear. The discussion was no longer about one loose ball scramble. It had become a debate over consistency, player protection, league standards, and the future image of the WNBA itself. And just when it seemed the controversy couldn't become any more complicated, the one person at the center of it all finally decided to speak. Instead of making the situation even more divisive, Caitlin Clark's response would completely change the direction of the conversation. As the debate continued to dominate headlines, many people expected Caitlin Clark to respond with frustration or anger. Instead, she took the conversation in a completely different direction. Speaking to reporters before an Indiana Fever practice, Clark addressed everything that had happened over the previous several days. But rather than focusing on the suspension or criticizing Alyssa Thomas personally, she chose to talk about something else entirely. She made one point absolutely clear. No player should be subjected to harassment, personal attacks, or threats because of what happens during a basketball game. Clark said that while people are free to discuss the play and debate officiating decisions, the abuse directed toward Thomas and her family was unacceptable. It was a message that immediately changed the tone of the conversation. Instead of adding more fuel to an already emotional situation, Clark encouraged everyone to separate legitimate criticism from personal harassment. That response surprised many observers. After all, Clark was the player who had absorbed the contact. She could have focused entirely on the missed call or expressed frustration toward her opponent. Instead, she chose to emphasize respect. That doesn't mean she dismissed concerns about officiating. Far from it. Throughout the season, Clark has acknowledged that consistency remains an important issue. Like many players around the league, she has spoken about wanting games to be officiated fairly and safely. But she also made it clear that accountability should never become an excuse for targeting individual players. There is a significant difference between criticizing decisions made on the court and attacking someone away from it. Clark wanted that distinction to remain clear. Her comments also reflected a pattern people have noticed throughout her career. Whether facing criticism, physical play, or intense media attention, Clark has generally avoided escalating public conflicts. Instead of responding emotionally, she has often redirected attention back toward basketball itself. That approach once again became evident here. Rather than allowing the story to become a personal feud between players, she shifted the discussion back toward the larger issues surrounding the game. In many ways, her response accomplished something the league itself had struggled to do. It helped